It is 8:35, and as promised, we are joined this morning by Zunaid Moti. He is the former CEO of the Moti Group, and of course, we've been following the story. It's a fascinating one because it talks to our right to privacy, it talks to public interest, it talks to the fact that the press in South Africa has done a remarkable job, because without the press and without the Constitutional Court, it is very unlikely, though without those two, it is very unlikely that we would have seen and understood the level of corruption during state capture. But what are those limits? Where do those limits extend to? Because whereas we might have been very grateful for them then, does it give the press carte blanche, if you'll excuse that expression, and the ability to simply delve into our private documents, claim that it's in public interest, and then scream press interference if not? So we wanted to ask Zunaid Moti that question, because this has been an ongoing case, and it still is a case that is playing out as we speak. A very good morning. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning. Hi, Howard. How are you doing? Thank you for having me on your show.
It's a great pleasure. So it's an interesting one because we recognize the value of a free press. Without a free press, we would, certainly in South Africa, we would have struggled. But at the same time, you're arguing that there are limits to that, right?
Sure. Let me just start off by saying that I think you're correct around the fact that the press have played a significant role, particularly in the new South Africa since our independence. And I think the role they've played in exposing corruption has been phenomenal. There have been some amazing journalists along the way. The media in general have played a fundamental role. But there comes a time and place where a businessman or an institution or an individual must always weigh up as to whether their rights are impinged or whether their rights are less than a journalist, etc. And I don't think it's ever become an issue until a couple of naughty journalists have decided to run an agenda. So I think there is that issue of whether or not you're entitled to a certain amount of privacy. I mean, can you just imagine in one of these firms in Stanton, if an upset little attorney, and in my case, attorney stole the documents, by the way, but he went into work one of these mornings and he was upset with the senior partner and he downloaded the whole data from from the business and disseminated it after looking at what was possibly saucy for the media. I mean, can you just imagine the impact that would have on customers of the business, on confidentiality, on things like client privilege? So there has to be a line, and we need to find that line so that people and businesses are protected. Otherwise, there'll be anarchy. You know?
And the interesting thing as well is the contention that you argued something ex parte. I actually find a ridiculous argument, because if the court allows you to do that, why would you go a route that gives you less chance of success? You followed the mechanism of the law. It's just an absurdity to suggest that you did something, and I'm not commenting on your business dealings at all, because I'm not knowledgeable, but I'm talking about in this case, how could you argue that somebody did something wrong by following an ex parte, which means, for anybody who isn't aware, it means that it didn't need to be opposed. You could argue something in front of the court without the opposition being there, but the court allows you to do that, and it doesn't allow you to do that in all cases, and yet that's been raised as an argument. What's your thoughts on that?
Look, I think that it is a particular process that's available, and it's one that's been there for a long period of time and determined by case law and so on. So it's an option and an alternative that you have based on circumstances. You can never be criticized to be operating within the framework of the law. So now it suits the narrative for the media or certain of the media to say that. What was concerning to me yesterday is, even if you look at the way News 24 behaved yesterday, or amaBhungane as well, it is very bad in the context that the narrative they want to drive is Moti versus journalism. It's really nothing to do with that. It's a bunch of naughty guys from amaBhungane, and I'm sure you've heard. What was more alarming yesterday as I got to the court, was the night before, is that I just discovered the difference between something being interesting and being of public interest. It's probably the topic we should discuss because
yes, I am getting there because I am going to go there because I think that's where a lot of this hinges on. But carry on your thoughts, and then we'll circle back to that.
You know, Howard, the issue is that my life seems to be a little bit more interesting than my neighbor, and sometimes guys want to just write and find out more, and I'm not a very quiet guy, and if I feel that my rights are not being protected, or I feel I'm being bullied, as they said this morning in the article that I am a bully, then I rise to the occasion. But that doesn't mean for 1 minute that you need to persecute somebody in the media, because I don't have any listed companies any longer. I have interest in listed companies and so on, but I'm an interesting fellow, but I'm certainly not a public interest in my opinion, you know. And the difference, for example, is when you look at amaBhungane, and this 2 nights ago, just the day before the case, I discovered that their chairperson was involved in or criticized to be a sexual predator in the universities. Now, that's public interest, but they hide it away and they don't talk about it, and they just write a one-liner somewhere that says the man has resigned. He was exposed day before yesterday, and all of a sudden Sam Sol comes along and says, "Oh, I fired the guy, I accepted his resignation," and they brush it underneath the carpet because it suits them. That's really not fair when you look at it. That's actually what should be in the public interest, letting people know that there's this predator running around and protected by Sam and his cronies since 2016. He's been the chairman. He's been obviously not behaving himself in the university.
Right. Well, listen, you know, it's hard for me to comment on that, and we will give them right of reply on that as well, because certainly we can't verify that. But what you're saying is, how do we determine? And it's a conversation we often have on this station and the show. Is we say, you know, should we report on this? Because yes, it's interesting to the public, but is it in public interest? And where you weigh up the damage that could be done to the families and to the person when it's just an interesting story and not in public interest, well, that's where you start. That's if you need to do that with soul and heart, because it really can impact. But I guess it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because a lot of, I mean, you're a colourful character. You know, you've got a very interesting past. I mean, the questions that I'm getting are talking about your Bugatti. You definitely haven't shied away from the public face, and it's kind of your brand in a way. Doesn't that public brand that you have created, doesn't that come with the flip side of exactly the story that you're living out at the moment? Is it a risk? Is it a risk inherent in who you are?
I think when you go out there and put yourself in the public one way or the other, there is some interesting elements that the public always want to know, as you correctly pointed out. But is it in public interest? And I'll just give an example so we can test it. Mm-hmm. And the fact that I do have a Bugatti, or the fact that I do drive it on the weekend or not, that's a very interesting fact, and people like to see it, and they like to know where it is and look at it. But that shouldn't be an element of writing nonsense about me as a result there, or trying to find a mudslinging opportunity for it. Now, you know, and when you talk about public interest, my take on it is, it should be letting the public know of something dangerous, or letting them be aware of something that could hurt them, or letting them know about something that could hurt their businesses, etc. Then, in my opinion, there is public interest insofar as that's concerned. Corruption, things like that are important for public to know, because in that way they can steer away from it. But being interesting by no means is a public interest, certainly. I mean, and who weighs it up? You know, interesting at the court, the attorney and advocate on the other side said, you know, when it comes to matters of public interest, it shouldn't be decided by a court. I was appalled by that. I mean, or the conduct of a journalist should not be decided in a court. It should be decided by they have this fraternity where
the press.
I forget what they call it now.
Yeah, editors forum, or one of the press societies.
Yes, no, that forum's designed by the media. And
right.
If the court's not allowed to intervene...
Right, in other words, it's policing itself, rather, that everybody else is policed by an external.
And you don't really need a degree to be a journalist. Let's be honest. No, I understand you could register. Not. You could just go and register, and you could become a journalist. So, I mean, you're more important than the FBI agents or There is certain South African police, you walk in there, you write whatever you want, there's no recourse. If you get sued, you don't have to have a recourse because most of these journalists, unfortunately, are not finding themselves in a privileged position. You sue them and what do you get? Nothing. Damage is done when they write the article, I guess.
Yeah. So looking back at it, I mean, obviously, I would imagine that the reason that there's such interest in you is because of the life that you've led, because of the diverse businesses that you've been involved with. Give us a sense of who you are. Where did you come from?
I think everybody kind of now knows where I came from. Even my parents-in-law didn't know where I came from in detail until a few weeks ago because of the media. But I come from a little town called Potgietersrus in the Northern Province. And, I've had a bit of a tough life in the context that I didn't come from a privileged background.
Right.
And, which is fine. And, I was out there, I was put into business because I just had to pay the bills, I guess. And I found opportunities. Some of them were good, some of them were bad. Some of them got me into a little bit of trouble. But nothing I've been put into a situation where I've been prosecuted in any way from a legal perspective, from a criminal perspective. And I've just been the guy that, I don't like being bullied. I was little when I was small. I hated bullies. Now, this morning I wake up and I see an article saying I'm a bully. I hate that whole narrative. But look, I feel, and I think you can concur with me, and I hope you do, is that once one or two people in the media decide they're going to deal with you, then they do. And you have no chance. I see a lot of my business associates, they say to me, Zunaid, just forget about this, it's going to blow over tomorrow. But there's a fundamental difference in the media today in that 20 years ago, and this is an important point I'd like to make, when you were in the media, people read the Daily Mail and the Star newspaper, and then after 2 or 3 days, all your family forgot about it, and the newspaper was destroyed.
Absolutely.
Today, it mounts and it's a cruise into Google and all of these things. And when they want to find out what you did 20 years ago, they just click in and it lives with you and it stays with you and your children. So the media laws that are in the country today, I think, need to attend to that and look at changing those issues. Because if someone's actually not guilty in what perceives to be an article out there that makes you guilty in the media and in the public, how do they change that? They can never.
And words are very emotive. I mean, I was looking at the News 24 article, and I write for News 24 every week. I'm a columnist there, but it doesn't mean that I need to agree with everything. It says, was the Moti Group asserting its right to privacy when it clandestinely obtained a gag order with amaBhungane? Now, that word, it already creates an impression, sneaky, clandestine. That's the power of our words, right? Because and this is something I feel very strongly about, is that if you follow due process, which you did, then you certainly can't be criticized for a strategy that brings success. It's an absurdity. You don't need to make the wrong decision just to appear to be fair. It's a ridiculous notion.
I would just stop here and say to you that I don't think that I have any particular issues with the rest of the media. The particular fight, if I can call it that, or issues, is around the amaBhungane guys and the News 24.
No, I'm very, very comfortable with what you're saying.
I don't have any issues with them.
Yeah.
No issues. And Samsol has a long-standing relationship with Adrian, and they go back a long time, and they support each other for whatever reason. And when you read the article, the power of words, as you just put it in there, is amazing, because when you write, you can make a guy look like a really rotten potato, and maybe he's a tomato, So it's just the way you sell it off to the media. The particular problem you have is a guy driving in a car, listening to the radio, or opening up your app and reading News 24, is you have a certain amount of trust in what you're reading. You assume at the same time, this must be right. And I think in certain of those cases with the media, I'm not referring to every media because I read a lot of other articles, but I look at News 24 as an example, and now I start looking at it with a little bit of jaundiced view and saying, hey, I need to look carefully. Is this right? Could they be spinning someone's story? Is there an agenda? Are there hired guns? Those elements as businessmen come into our head. Your business associate goes off and has a long meeting with Samsol, and they decide they're going to knock you out, they write nonsense about you. You don't know that. I can't say that. I can't not say that. But
no,
in my
and
case,
you don't, and
I
you're
certainly know
there's
an agenda going on.
You're not holding the mic, and we always know that the person holding the mic or holding the pen ultimately has the last word, because you can publish and you can report what you choose to do. What is the impact? Has this had an impact on the business itself? You're no longer CEO of the business, but how does it impact on the business?
I think it was very difficult for me to just become obsolete and silent, and I use that word obsolete because I feel that way now, because I was very much in the front of everything that was done, and it became a challenge for me to stay at home and go to Zimbabwe and not be involved in the local affairs, because Don Mahashani is quite a strong guy. You know, he's into his compliance and doing things a different way, and I have to kind of respect that. So there was a massive change for me. It's become a little bit difficult for me from that perspective. But from a business perspective, I think it's been good for the family, and I think for the kids going forward, it's going to be fantastic. Dondo is teaching my son a lot. He's being mentored by Dondo. So I like the fact that, but certain of the guys don't have that entrepreneurial spirit to take risks, to do things slightly differently the way I would have done them. But I think times are changing, and I'm adapting to that now, and so be it.
And give us your view on South Africa, on the future of, many of our listeners obviously are listening in some horror with some of the things going on in and around us. I'm very optimistic in general, but I'd like your thoughts on the country as we move forward through various difficult periods.
Howard, let's be frank, this is a beautiful country that you could never live in another country at the type of money and cost that we do. There are some limitations, the security elements, the service delivery of electricity and water has now become an issue, but those challenges most countries have along the way. We have beautiful people. We have an amazing landscape. Our climate is amazing. Our country is cheap to live in. Let's be very frank. If you go to the UK, and you try and live anything similar to the lifestyles that we live, it will be horrendous. The costs are ridiculous. Our food is cheap, and we're allowed to have a freedom of religion, expression, tradition. All of those type of elements are quite easy to live in South Africa about. So I love the country. I'd certainly not want to be the president. Unfortunately, he's in a tight corner all the time. I mean, the poor guy is a wealthy man. He doesn't deserve, in my opinion, the negativity that's been attracted to him, because he's one man trying to change a whole nation, and he's just unfortunately in the wrong place at the wrong time for South Africa. But we need to support him because he's our leader, and I think we need to brush off the other elements and work together so that we can make this place an amazing place and a better place. So I'm very optimistic. I do, however, love Zimbabwe, as you well know, and the public know.
Absolutely.
I just love that country. The people are amazing.
The people are amazing. It's just the most
incredible. They're so
incredible
intelligent and they're so driven and they work hard. And it's just fantastic. I love Zimbabwe. I must tell you equally. So.
And that is.
I think that's my view. I hope we.
Yeah.
I really hope that other businessmen out there will understand that. When you are under attack from one or two of the media, you need to also create your own platform. And one of the reasons I say that is because I've started creating what they call the social media platform. I'm only sort of 8 weeks into it.
Yes.
I've learned a lot. I didn't really know how to use my computer.
If you think that traditional media can be rough with you, wait till you experience a little bit more on social media. But no, I think it is right. It's regaining a voice or giving yourself a voice in other areas where perhaps you haven't been allowed to have that before. So good luck with that. We'll certainly keep in touch and see how this is going. Zunaid Moti, former CEO of the Moti Group, talking to us about reports and the court case that has taken place. I'd love your thoughts, your reaction. Carol says, interesting question, such hopeful answers. Karen says, golden buzzer today. And let's go to music. We'll be back after this.
ChaiFM, your station of choice since 2008. This